Okay, so welcome everybody. This is the free introductory lesson in the series of lessons that where we're going to be working on squatting and improving the movements involved in squatting. Um, so I have been interested in this topic for quite a while, but I haven't actually taught any lessons directly aimed at improving squatting before. It's something I've been interested in doing for some time. Um, I realized, even though I've been doing Feldenkrais lessons for many years, I think probably around when I turned 40, I realized, oh, I don't really like squat down very much, like hang out in a squat. I did a lot of bending and getting low through martial arts practice, but just like as a daily thing, it wasn't something that I would do. And I thought I should probably work on that. It's kind of a fundamental human movement, and it's something that people can do well into old age in cultures where people do it all their lives, right? Where people don't start sitting in chairs when they're 5 years old and then for the rest of the time. Um, so it's really something that we tend to lose the ability. We lose the ability to squat just from not doing it. It's definitely an instance of the use it or lose it adage. And so these lessons are gonna be focused on improving the range of motion that you need in your ankles and knees and hips, as well as the mobility and coordination that you need to squat easily. So we're going to be taking a variety of approaches here. Some kind of more direct, working on the movements of getting up and down and from standing and bending, and going into squatting movements, as well as kind of a more indirect approach using Feldenkrais Awareness Through Movement lessons to develop the mobility and coordination that will be helpful in using kind of variety of unusual movements and situations to develop novel movement patterns and interrupt our habitual ways that we use ourselves, which can interfere with being more mobile and agile. So some of these lessons will be involving the use of a chair, as we're going to do today. So for today, if you came in late, you should have a chair nearby. So we're going to use the backrest to rest your hands on for some balance support. And some of the other lessons will also be using a chair. About half of the session will be lying down today, lying on your back. So have a mat or a pad that you can lie on as well. And so going forward, I'm going to be teaching this 8-week series. I'll mention it again. It starts next week. And I had to change the time. So instead of 10 to 11, it's going to be 9 to 10 a.m., just so everybody is aware of that. And I'll repeat that later. But so for all the lessons, they may not all involve a chair, but probably a good idea just to have a chair nearby as well as a pad to lie on. But we're going to start standing today. Any questions so far in what I've said? Okay. Let's get started. Let's have you come to stand so that you are facing the back of the chair. And you're just going to rest your hands, lightly on the back of the chair. You don't want to lean on it heavily. Just it's going to be there for a little support and balance. And you want to spread your legs a bit wider than normal. Not as wide as possible, but we're going to have a bit of a spread here. And we're just going to start simply with some gentle movements. So to begin with, can you please just bend your right knee slowly and then unbend it or straighten it again? And so we're just going to do this movement several times. So your foot stays on the floor and you're going to bend your knee and then straighten it back to where you were again. And we're going to do this many times. So with these movement lessons, you kind of just carry on the movement as I talk about it and give you more instructions. about what to pay attention to, and you can rest anytime you need to. So as you bend the right knee, you can pay attention to the quality of the movement of bending. Does it feel easy or stiff or difficult? Is it comfortable? How is your foot taking the weight of yourself as you bend your knee? How does your foot accommodate that movement? Can you see if you can reduce any unnecessary effort anywhere else in yourself? So it's just a simple, easy movement of bending your right knee and then coming back up. And how does your right knee track over your foot? Does it kind of come towards the big toe? Does it go over the middle of the foot? Does it go over the outside of the foot, the little toe side? Okay. And pause for a moment. Okay. And actually, let's do that same movement a couple more times. So just bending the right knee again. And notice what happens with the foot. So, are you lifting your heel at all? Or is your heel staying on the floor? Maybe try a couple times lifting your heel as you bend the knee. So a lot of you, I can see like your hips and maybe your knees, but not your feet. So that I'm just gonna, and that's okay. I'm just I'm gonna mention a few different ways to do this movement. So um, this time, leave your heel on the floor as you bend your knee again, if you weren't already. Notice the difference there. Okay, and pause just a moment in standing there. And this time, do a movement of lifting the front of your right foot. So you rock back onto the heel. So the heel stays on the floor and you lift the whole forefoot, the front of the right foot, flexing your ankle and rocking back onto the heel. And notice how easy or difficult this movement is. And notice what happens with your knee. Does it bend or straighten? And what happens with the right hip joint? So if you do not allow your right hip joint, the right side of your pelvis, to move backwards, it can be rather difficult to lift the front of the foot. Try keeping your pelvis kind of forward as you lift the front of the right foot and see what that's like. So don't let your pelvis move backward. Can you lift the front of the right foot at all? Maybe a little bit. And now see if you can facilitate the movement of lifting the front of the right foot by taking the whole right side of the pelvis backwards. Take the right hip joint back as you lift the front of the right foot and flex the foot. That's it. Good. And pause again. And now leaving your foot on the floor, can you do that same movement of taking the right side of the pelvis backwards? So you take the right hip joint backwards, away from the chair, and then let it come to where you were again. And do that several times. So this time your foot stays on the floor, but you do that same movement of taking the hip joint back. Good. Okay, and pause just a moment. Now we're going to do one more thing here. So this time, as you take the right hip joint back, bend your right knee like we started with. So you bend your right knee and take the right hip joint backwards at the same time. And it doesn't have to be a big movement. You don't have to go as low as you can. Make it comfortable. But see if you can take the right hip joint back as you bend the right knee. That's it. Very nice. Okay. Leave that. Stand for a moment. And let's just walk around a little bit as a kind of a break from standing and doing these movements, and observe if you can feel any difference between the right leg and the left leg as you walk. What kinds of things can you notice about, does one leg feel freer or more stable? Does one leg feel more relaxed or more alive? there's not a right answer to these questions. It's just important to start to pay attention and notice if you can feel some difference between the two sides there. Okay. And come on back to your chair there. So oftentimes, most frequently, these Feldenkrais Awareness Through Movement lessons are done lying on the floor or sitting on the floor. There's some that are standing like this. Usually when we're on the floor, we're taking a rest by lying on our back. But while we're standing here, we're just going to take rests by either standing or walking or sometimes sitting. So now let's do some movements with the left side. So again, standing facing the back of your chair with your hands on the backrest for a little support. Begin to just bend the left knee slowly and then unbend it and do that several times. And observe, what is the quality of bending of the left knee compared to the right? Does it feel smoother and easier? Or does it feel less easy and more difficult or stiffer or just different somehow? Maybe one's more comfortable. How does the left foot accommodate the movement of bending the knee? As we go along in the series, you'll come to feel and understand that what's happening with the foot and the ankle is really important in terms of how your knee is able to bend and move, and there's an intimate relationship between all of the joints here of the legs, the ankles, knees, and hips. And a few times try lifting the left heel as you bend the left knee. And then leave the heel on the floor and just bend the left knee a few more times. And then just take a short pause in standing. Okay, and now let's explore this movement of lifting the front of the left foot. So you lift the forefoot and rock back onto the heel, and see if you can allow your left hip joint, the left side of your pelvis, to move backwards away from the chair and to facilitate the movement of lifting the front of the left heel there. That's it. And just for contrast's sake, don't let the left hip joint move backwards. Keep your pelvis forwards and try to lift the front of the left foot. And does that make it easier or more difficult? How does that change your experience there? And then once again, allow the left hip joint to move backwards to lift the front of the left foot. That's it. Good. And just pause for a moment. And now let's have you just do this movement of taking the left hip joint backwards, but leave your foot on the floor and just see, can you take the left hip joint back easily? That's it. And now pause just a moment briefly. And now combine the movements of bending your left knee with taking the left hip joint backwards. So as you bend the left knee, you take the left hip joint back. That's it.
Seth, so
Yeah.
when I do that, I'm basically like, when I bend my knee, it's like I'm really using my right hip to like kind of go back.
Mm-hmm.
And my right hip is coming forward. Is that the right?
Yeah. So if you're only taking one hip joint backwards, the other one is probably moving in the opposite direction, right? So there's different ways you can do it. You can try if just doing what you're doing, which is taking one hip joint back, the other one will come forward a little bit, or you can allow both hip joints to move back slightly, but the left one more than the right.
Okay.
Just explore those different options for now. We're going to kind of clarify as we go along.
Thanks for that clarification.
Mm-hmm. Okay, everybody just pause and take a short walk around the room again as a rest and observe what you feel in the two legs now. Does that feel different than before after working just with the right leg? What kinds of differences do you notice in the movement of the left ankle, the knee, the hip? Any change in sensation there and the ease of walking? Again, it's just important to start to pay attention to notice differences, even if you can't exactly put your finger on it or name what difference you feel. Okay, and come on back to your chair one more time. And resting your hands on the back of the chair like that. Slowly begin to bend both knees a bit. And again, you want to have a wider than normal stance, almost as if your knees would kind of go around the chair if you were to bend down lower. Make it comfortable for yourself, but we're having a bit of a wider stance today. And so let's combine actually the movement of bending both knees. Now, so some of you, when you bend your knees, your pelvis is actually moving forward, following your knees, isn't it? So maybe try that on purpose, everybody, a few times. So as you bend your knees, your pelvis is going forward, right? So a lot of people, when they think about squatting down or even sitting down, the pelvis kind of goes forward as if you're going to fall into the floor forward. But here, what we really want to do is start to take the hip joints backwards as we bend the knees. So try this movement of taking your hip joints, your pelvis, where you lift your leg, your leg creases, right? That's the hip joint in front. You want to take the crease of your hip joints backwards. That's it. As you bend both knees. So you're bending both hips and both knees. And because your feet are anchored to the floor while you're bending your knees, your ankles are also bending because your knee is moving forward over your ankle. So you're bending all of the joints of your legs there. And just go gently a few more times and just see how easy is it for you to lower yourself to the floor. So you're taking the pelvis back as you bend your knees. How easy is it for your pelvis to lower towards the floor? And you get to use the chair for a little balance there. Okay, that's good. So please leave that and come and lie on the floor on your back. And go ahead and mute yourself again if you have unmuted yourself here. Or maybe I can do it. And then if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself. It's totally fine to ask questions. I'm going to mute myself for one moment. My dogs have, of course, decided it's the best time to go out and bark at the neighbors' dogs right now while I'm trying to record this. So, okay. So if I mute myself and I disappear for a few seconds, that's what I'm doing. Okay. So lie on your back, and if you can have your legs long, that's fine. We're just going to take a moment to observe your contact with the floor. For those of you who have done Feldenkrais lessons before, this is often how we start a lesson, just noticing your contact and scanning along the back of yourself to feel which parts of yourself are resting clearly on the floor and where perhaps you're a little bit lifted away from the floor. We're not going to go into a lot of detail right now because we're doing our scanning more standing up and with the movements in standing. So just briefly observe how your back is resting on the floor. Is there a little curve behind your lower back? Is it more on one side or the other. Just get a sense of the overall impression you're making on the floor. If you feel the contact from your pelvis up to the back of your head, how much of the back of yourself do you feel touching the floor here? How is the weight on the two sides of your pelvis? Is it more or less even? Do you feel more pressure on one side of your pelvis? And how about the shoulder blades? Is there a difference in the pressure or weight you feel on the two shoulder blades? And then just get a general sense of how your arms and legs are resting on the floor. Okay, now please bend your knees and stand your feet about shoulder width apart. So these movements in standing, where we're going towards the squatting movement, bending all of the joints, it's just, there's like I said, all of the joints are involved in bending here. And so now we're going to look at folding and bending ourselves in a different way, lying on the back. So can you please put your right hand behind your head and now lift your left leg towards yourself so you can hold below the left knee with your left hand. So below means not behind, but in front of the knee on the shin. Yeah, on the shin below the knee towards your foot. Yeah, that's it. But somewhere easily that you can reach comfortably. And here in this position, slowly and gently use your right hand to lift your head forward and bring your right elbow in the direction of your left knee. And at the same time, you use your left hand on the left knee to bring the knee towards the elbow. And then you come back, bring the knee and elbow apart, let your head rest on the floor a moment, and then repeat that movement. And see if you can do this in such a way that it's comfortable and easy. So you're not trying to go as far as you possibly can. It's not that you have to touch the elbow and knee. It's just that you move them in that direction and fold yourself across this diagonal here. And feel how you can use your breath to help. So it's typically going to feel a little easier if you begin to lift your head at the moment you exhale. So the air is coming out of your lungs as you fold yourself, and then that allows your chest to bend and your ribs to soften, the muscles between your ribs there. And closer together, the ribs fold. That's it. And just feel how the contact of your back changes. What part of your back presses backwards as you bring the elbow and knee towards one another there? There's some part that's going to press into the floor a little bit. Okay, good. Let your foot down. Pause just a moment. Keep your right hand behind your head. And now bring your right leg up and hold your right below your right knee with your left hand. So your right hand is still behind your head, just like a moment ago. Same hand behind your head. We're switching the legs. So your left hand is now holding your right knee. And slowly and gently lift your head with your right hand as you exhale. And now bring the right knee and right elbow a little bit towards each other and then apart again. And feel how the pressure of the contact of your back against the floor is a little bit different now, the way it's changing, right? You're pressing a slightly different part of yourself into the floor when you're bringing the right elbow and right knee towards one another. You're still folding yourself, but now you're bending more on the right side of yourself, aren't you? That's good. Just a few times like that, and then rest, put your foot down, bring your arm down. Just take a little rest lying on your back. We're going to explore quite a variety of different ways of folding yourself and bending yourself like this, lying on your back. So we're not going to spend a long time on any one variation because we're going to do a bunch of different movements. And I will be telling you to rest periodically, but if you feel like you're getting fatigued, just rest as often as you need to. It's better to have kind of fresh attention and not be fatigued than to overdo it here. You'll get more out of these sessions. So go ahead and bend your knees again if they're not already. And now this time, put your left hand behind your head and bring your left knee closer to yourself and hold below the left knee with your right hand. So again, below means in front of the knee on the shin. That's it. And now go ahead and breathe out as you lift your head with your left arm and bring your left elbow and left knee towards one another and then apart. You're folding yourself, pressing the left side of your back into the floor. Feel how that's different on this side. Perhaps it's easier for you, perhaps less easy. Each time you bring your elbow and knee apart, let your head rest on the floor briefly, but you can keep your leg up and then do it again. Just a few more times there. That's it. Okay, good. Put your foot down. Keep your left hand behind your head. Pause just a moment there. Take a short break. And then now bring your right leg closer to yourself and hold with your right hand, your right knee. And now you're going to fold across yourself. So you lift your head as you exhale, bringing your left elbow and right knee towards one another, gently pressing the back. Feel how the middle of your back presses into the floor. Still letting the air out to help yourself fold and bend. Feel what happens with your lower back as you bring the right knee closer to yourself. Good. Please leave that and stretch your arms and legs out and take a little rest again. And observe your contact with the floor and what's changed after doing all of these movements of folding yourself, pressing your back backwards, shortening the front of yourself. Somehow did that lengthen the back of yourself? Do you feel more of the back of yourself resting on the floor now than a few minutes ago? Sense the feeling of the way your legs rest on the floor and the back of your pelvis. Okay, please bend your knees again. Stand your feet about shoulder width apart. And this time, interlace your fingers together and put both hands behind your head. And going to lift your head with both hands, but before you do, you bring your elbows forward. So your elbows are pointing more forward instead of out to the sides. This will help your shoulders be more free to move away from the floor. And now as you lift your head, lift your right leg towards yourself and bring your right elbow and right knee a little bit towards each other. So you're lifting your head with both hands, but you direct the right elbow and right knee towards each other and then come back, put the foot down, put your head down. And just try that a couple of times. How easy or difficult is it when you don't have your hand to help move the knee? That's it. And then a couple of times, direct your right elbow towards your left knee. Bring your left knee up and see what is it like in the diagonal here when you don't have the hand to help. For some of you, it's quite a difference, and for others, not as much of a difference. Okay, that's good. And pause again. And now let's do the other side. So you're going to lift your left elbow towards your right knee and your right knee towards your left elbow. A couple of times. We're not going to do it a lot of times because, like I said, we're doing a lot of these movements in different configurations here. Just feel how your back presses backwards. Still think of exhaling as you lift your head. Good. And then switch so you bring the left elbow and left knee towards each other a couple of times and feel what happens with your lower back and the middle of your back when you are lifting the elbow and knee on the same side compared to the diagonal. Okay. Good. And please leave that and rest. Bring your arms down. You can stretch your legs out or leave them up, whatever you prefer. Just enjoy giving your weight to the floor for a moment, feeling again how your contact what the floor is changing over the course of the session. And once again, bend your knees, stand your feet on the floor about shoulder width apart. And this time, bring both legs up closer to yourself and hold from behind each knee with each hand. So behind the right knee with the right hand and behind the left knee with the left hand. That's it. And your thumb is together with your other fingers. So your whole hand is underneath each knee. And that's it. So now, as you lift your head, bring your knees towards yourself. So this time your hands are behind your knees instead of below your knees. So in the crook of your knees, behind the legs. Before we had the hand in front of the knee on the shin bone, but now your hands are behind the knees in the crook of your knees, right? In the where your knee bends behind the leg. Behind, that's right. Behind. Okay. And now, so you're lifting your head. You don't have your hands to help, but you still want to fold your chest so you're not overworking your neck muscles. It's really your whole front of yourself is shortening that lifts your head. Your back presses backwards. Okay, good. And now leave your head on the floor and just a couple of times bring your legs closer to your chest using your hands and arms to help. That's it. And feel the movement of each hip joint as you bring the legs closer and what happens with your pelvis and your lower back. How does the weight of your legs move your pelvis? How does your pelvis roll up towards your head a bit? And now leave your legs there and holding on with your hands, and a couple of times just lift your head towards your knees, but leave your knees where they are. Still folding the front of yourself as you exhale, pressing your back backwards. Good. And now do those two things together once more. Bring the knees toward yourself as you lift your head, really curling up. That's it. Great. And please leave that and stretch yourself out and rest again. Observe how your legs are resting on the floor and the feeling of how your back is resting. It's funny how when you're doing these movements of folding yourself up like this, the result can be feeling a lot longer as you rest there on the floor. Okay, so please bend your knees again, stand your feet on the floor. And this time, bring your, let's see, let's do it this way. Put your right hand behind your head. You're going to lift your right leg up so that you can hold your right foot with your left hand. So if you can't reach your foot for some reason, you can hold your ankle, but otherwise you want to grab the sole of your foot with your left hand, the sole of your right foot, your thumb together with the other fingers. You're kind of holding the sole of the foot. Your fingers are on top of the foot around the outside edge of your foot. That's it. Your thumb is together with your other fingers. So your fingers are pointing, your left hand, your fingers are pointing to the right. And now lift your head with your right hand. And as you lift your right foot a bit towards the ceiling, that's it. And then go back. And just do what you can easily. Don't make a powerful movement, just simple. The range of movement will expand as you go slowly over time here, but it's almost as if there's like a little hoop that you've made with your left hand and your right leg, and it's like you were going to put your head in that hoop or put your elbow in that hoop. You don't actually have to do it, but that's the direction, right? You're directing your elbow and your head as if you were going to put your head through this little ring you've made. Slowly and gently, and feel the movement of the right hip joint and the right side of the pelvis as you lift your head and your right leg like that. That's it. Just once or twice more. That's very nice. Okay. Please put your foot down and your head down and just pause a moment with your knees bent. And now switch sides. So your left hand is behind your head and you're holding the sole of your left foot with your right hand. And your fingers are, your right hand is around the outside edge of the foot from underneath, holding the sole of the foot. So the fingers are on top of the left foot and the palm of your hand is on the sole of your foot. And slowly lift your foot towards the ceiling as you lift your head with your left hand. Remember, you can bring your left elbow forward before you lift your head. It'll make the movement easier. The left shoulder can come forward. You can slowly fold yourself, pressing the back backwards, and feel the movement of the left hip joint and the left side of your pelvis. How is that different than when you did this on the other side? As if you were going to put your elbow in this hoop that you're creating between your foot and your arm. Just gently and slowly. A few more times. That's it. And when you're done with that, go ahead and rest. You can stretch your legs out. And once again, bend your knees, stand your feet. Okay, this time you're going to bring both legs up towards yourself and you're going to, now your hands between your knees in the middle of your legs, you're going to hold the right foot with your right hand and the left foot with the left hand. So now your fingers are kind of pointing to the outside. So your fingers of your right hand are holding the right foot from the sole of the foot, kind of the instep, you would call it there. That's it. And the left hand and left foot, the same thing. That's it. That's it. And now gently direct. Yeah. And if you can't, that's okay. You can hold the ankles, but direct your feet up towards the ceiling here. So that's it. That's right. And now, and let your knees be soft. They can bend. You don't have to straighten your legs. You're just orienting the feet towards the ceiling. And now in this position, can you very gently press down with your right hand on the right foot to take the right hip joint kind of towards the floor? So you're pressing the whole leg into the hip joint with your hand very gently and comfortably, but you're putting pressure through the foot, through the leg, into the hip joint, into the back of the pelvis. That's it. And then try that with the other side, pressing with the left hand down through the left foot, into the left hip joint, and the left side of the pelvis. And if you're holding the ankles, that's fine. You just see if you can find a way to put a little pressure through the whole leg into the hip joint there. That's it. Okay, good. Put your feet on the floor again. Rest a moment with your knees bent. So for some people, it's a little challenge to reach the feet, and that's okay. That's you can hold the ankles, and this will get better over time. But we've been doing all these variations of lifting your head and knees towards one another to round your back, lengthen your back, and develop the bending of the knees and the hip joints and the connection with the pelvis. And that's all been kind of leading up to these few movements that we're doing here, where you can hold the feet and press into the hip joints, because that's sort of the like the one movement that all of these movements are helpful. They're all working on bending the joints of your legs. And like I said, but this particular variation of pressing through the feet into the hip joints does something very, very interesting and helpful with the hip joints that I think really helps with the squatting movements that we're working on. So one more time, bend your legs, bring your legs towards yourself and hold your feet in the same way. So the right hand holding the instep of the right foot, the left hand holding the instep of the left foot from between your knees there. And you're feet are oriented towards the ceiling. And now press gently with both hands through both feet into both hip joints, kind of spreading the hip joints as you press them gently, and then release it and do that a few times. You press into both hip joints at the same time, kind of spreading them slightly apart as you press down into the hip joint. That's it. And now see if you can lift your head at the same time. So as you press into the feet, into the hip joints, you lift your head and exhale. And see if that makes it a little easier to press into the feet there. That's it. Very nice. And please leave that and let your legs down. Rest again. So if you want to come back and practice any of these movements, you might need to do a few of the other movements first to kind of warm up and get your body bending and flexible. But if you are able to just hold your feet and press into the hip joints like this can be a great little movement to practice to help your flexibility and mobility of your hip joints to help improve your squatting. Okay, one more time, bend your knees, stand your feet, and just interlace your fingers behind your head one more time. And now go ahead and just lift your head and bring your right elbow and right knee towards each other as you exhale one time, and just feel what that's like. And then the other side. So everybody's doing something slightly different. That's okay. We're going to test each one. So you bring the same side elbow and knee together once, and then the diagonal once or twice, and then the other side. So just all four of those movements, just once or twice each, just to see if that's a little bit easier than at the beginning of the session here, right? Just test that out. Okay, good. And please leave that. Stretch out just a moment and sense your contact with the floor compared to when you first laid on the floor, how your back is resting, the length of yourself and how much contact you feel, how much of yourself is being supported by the floor, the weight on the two sides of your pelvis and your two shoulder blades. And then slowly bend your knees, stand your feet, and slowly roll to your side to come and sit up, and then eventually stand up and take your time. But we're going to come back to standing behind the chair when you're ready. We'll give you a minute or two to get reacquainted with standing on your legs. That's it. And then when you make your way to your chair, you're going to rest your hands on the back of the chair with a wider than normal stance as the way we started. And now slowly begin to review some of the movements where you bend both knees and take both hip joints back at the same time and lower yourself towards the floor. Remember, the hip joints go backwards. Your pelvis really moves backwards. And you bend the knees at the same time. And see if it's a little bit easier to fold yourself, lowering yourself towards the floor. And see if you can feel that your knees are kind of your knees are kind of spreading apart a little bit as you lower yourself, that there's this feeling of the hip joints kind of spreading apart, the knees and the hips, allowing your pelvis to move backwards more easily. That's it. So this is a nice kind of reference to come back to during the series of lessons where you lower yourself, you can have your hands resting on the chair and see how far the pelvis can move backwards as you do that. And, as you do this movement, as you are getting more and more mobile or flexible and lowering yourself, you can also turn yourself around or turn the chair around so your hands are resting on the front of the seat if that's comfortable for you. That's another way to do this as you're getting more comfortable lowering yourself. Or if you're feeling good with your balance, you can take your arms in front of yourself without the chair and just reach your hands out in front of you and lower yourself into a squatting position with your arms in front. So those are all different variations you can do. You can hold the back of the chair. If the back of the chair is kind of more at hip height, that's a helpful kind of height to have as you lower yourself. But you can also use the seat of the chair. The arms in front is nice because it gives you a little bit of counterbalance as you lower your pelvis backwards. The arms in front help balance that out. Sometimes it's actually helpful to even have a very, a lightweight object in your hands that you can hold in front of yourself to counterbalance. And that actually, even though you might think, oh, that's harder to hold something, it actually can help with that counterbalancing to lower your pelvis a little further. So you can use a couple of books or very lightweight dumbbells or a lightweight kettlebell, or sometimes I'll even hold a stool. So whatever kind of feels comfortable for you, but that can be another helpful way to practice these squatting movements, is holding something in front of yourself a bit. If the object is too heavy, you don't want to reach so the reaching of the arms forward you want to do if you're not holding a weight. If you're holding a weight, bring the arms a little closer to your body. You don't want to have your arms stretched out too far when you're holding the weight. So yeah, that's it. If you're holding a weight in your hands, bring it closer to the front of yourself. But if you have no weight in your hands, you can stretch the arms out. So these are some movements that you can practice during the week. And if you like, you can do some of these movements as a reference. You can start by bending the joints of the legs independently, as we did today. You can lie on the floor and do some of the movements of lifting your head and knees towards each other, and especially this movement of the feet towards the ceiling and pressing into the hip joints and spreading them apart is a very nice way to facilitate this movement. Okay, so I'm going to end the recording here.